perhaps we take it from there, because Steve was just reading out the flashes coming from your speech. So we talk about the Italian situation, the golden law, and what's the latest around that. So when do you see clarity, and are you willing to actually do what the government wants?
I think with respect to BPM and the golden power, it's more a question of clarification than a question of content. So if you ask about the core requirements of the government, which is continue to finance the economy, the small and medium-sized corporates, Mittelstand here, affluent private clients, families. I think at the core, we don't disagree. Actually, it's already in our plan. If you look at our strategy entails an increase in penetration in the Mittelstand, an increase in penetration on the families, and increased commercial momentum. So there is no big debate there. There is a debate on definitions. There is a debate on what does it mean cease activity in Russia, for example. Yeah. In our opinion, we have ceased. We have not given any new loans since 21. We have reduced to almost zero in October, zero. All of our cross-border, no new one. We have reduced our cross-border payments from 25 billion a quarter to about 8, and is going down. What we're maintaining is something that we are expected to maintain for European companies that are working in Russia, or European governments or companies that buy steel, energy, commodities, and others from Russia. They need to pay for that. Now, if you keep that open, you will have some deposits, because as you do a payment, you have deposit. So is that definition for you ceasing Russia or not ceasing Russia? Depending on the definition, it can be a very different outcome. And given that if you breach a rule of the golden power, you're liable for 20 billion in fine, this is a risk we cannot take. So if the government clarify, or if we clarify with the government those, and they are as we think they are, I think there is a good probability we'll continue. If we do not reach that, then we will pull back and move on.
Do you think that's likely in that short time frame until that freeze is over?
So, obviously, in order to solve things, you need to meet.
Yes.
And that in Europe with government seems to be difficult, given that they have a lot of other priorities. This is why we asked for a suspension, because in order for us to have that dialogue and then have enough time to inform investors and shareholders of BPM, of our plan, of what we want to do, et cetera, usually you're given more than 2 months or 3 months. But as we're losing time waiting for a resolution on this, we haven't been doing that. So we've asked for a suspension to be able to have that time. Let's see what happens. It's not fully in our hands.
At the same time, there are reports that, at least from the European antitrust authorities, you might actually get clearance for the deal if you give up some 206 branches in North Italy, I think. Is that right?
Yes. Well, what I would say is what I said in the room before, is that in banking consolidation or M&A, I don't know about our industry. We'll see what happens. There is now a new factor that all of us need to take into consideration, and that new factor is let's call it government or political intervention. And I'm not saying that as a criticism. Governments are a lot more intrusive in the way they look at things. That alters the rule of the games very materially. And it also alters what we think are the rules of the game for management teams. So as a management team, I've always believed my job is to support the economy of my country, support the clients, and create value for my shareholders. But the moment you have a political angle in that, you can have management team that just because they do not like the situation, they lobby to government, and that becomes a barrier you cannot pass. I personally don't think that that's the way for management teams. That does not mean the government should not look at it, but using lobby to try and derail things that would be in the best interest of your company is something that I personally have a problem with. So if you go back to what you asked, if you look at all the steps, ECB, our regulators, Bank of Italy, EVAS for insurance, European Union on antitrust. All of them, they have all come back exactly where we thought they would come back, i.e. they took their time, they looked at the numbers, it was rational. There was not one outcome that was different. So had it been for that, the deal would already be well along. But now you have another element.
Yeah, when do you think that thinking or the focus on national interest has actually started? Because we don't only see it in Italy, we also see it in Germany.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. But at the end of the day, there is a lot of focus, being Italian, on Italy or on Germany. Yeah. But effectively, wherever there is an element of M&A, that exists. It exists in Spain, in Italy, in Germany. You can look at a while back, Hungary. You may, depending on what the outcome is, see something in Poland. In a completely different way, you see it in Greece. You see it in Romania. It's everywhere. When, I don't know, in my view, there has been an acceleration of that during COVID. I mean, government took another step in the direction of intervening and supporting, etc., and that led to taking a view, a greater view and a greater level of intervention on a number of elements. But now we are at a point where that view and that intervention trumps everything else. Because everything else can be perfect, but if that view has a different view, it doesn't go forward. And I think it's, at least for me, coming from the past I had, it's probably excessive.
In Germany, it's so far only verbal intervention because Commerzbank is not officially something which needs to be shielded in terms of national interest. Do you feel still that this opposition, also from the new Chancellor Merz, would prevent you to follow up?
Well, look, I would say the following. First of all, I think at some point there will need to be an alignment of facts. And for me, the facts are we raise our stake to 10%, buying the stake directly from the Ministry of Finance of Germany. We were the only strategic invited. We were invited in the morning, we signed an NDA, we were asked to increase the bid. So then telling me that we were opaque and hostile, by the way, during all that process, and we can prove it, we were in continuous dialogue with the then leadership of Commerzbank, who was supportive. Then the wind changed in less than a week. But we did exactly what we said we would do. We're going to raise to 30. We're not going to launch an offer. For now, we're not going to participate into the shareholder meeting nor intervene, but we're going to look at how your plan maps out. And so now we have cleared all the legal hurdles, all the regulatory hurdles. We're nearly at the end. Yeah. And the next step is whether we take control of the shares that we don't have, the 20% we don't have, and we consolidate Commerzbank in our results. From that point on, our position changes slightly because we will be obliged to care, for my shareholder, on the performance of Commerzbank. And if that performance is disappointing, my personal view, Q1 is disappointing in terms of how the German bank has performed. We will need to take action. Yeah. But we're not going to move for the time being until we have a constructing solution with the government. But at the same time, it is also fair that the government considers that we got in because we were invited. Now we have an investment that is worth 9 billion in that bank, and that we need to do the interest of our shareholders as well.
The share price has risen a lot,
yes.
Commerzbank. Is it still attractive because you want to do something good for your shareholders at that price level to put another premium on the share price and to make an offer?
So, first of all, as I said, at the moment we are far away from that. Secondly, in our opinion, the share price has gone well beyond the fundamentals. There is a lot of activity which is directed at keeping the share price at higher level that we see every day. But we're patient because that activity eventually will run into losses. You cannot have a bank that has not changed very much and that has performed in terms of the underlying as they have performed in Q4 and in Q1, that went from being the lowest valued in Europe to 11.5 times earnings based on what exactly? So no, at this level, we would not see value for our investors. Actually, we would not. We are very happy for the gain we've had on the 30, but we wouldn't see value for our investors.
Let me ask you one last question on your master plan, because you're buying stakes in Greece, you're having a stake in Romania, you're trying to increase the stakes in Germany, also trying to expand your footprint in Italy. Are you about to plan to build that European sort of Wall Street-sized bank?
Well, I think you can look at it like that. If we all believe the stated intentions of every single European government and of the European Union, which is strengthen Europe, go for banking union, and create an economic bloc that can be competitive towards China, the US, etc., we are the private solution. We are the private solution because in order to go to banking union, you need to have a pan-European bank. We are now in 13 markets, plus one with Greece as a partner, 14. And we have done that every time in a way that adds value for our shareholders. So notwithstanding that there isn't banking union, we are progressing in a way that is respectful of the laws, the regulation, and adds value for our shareholders. So in the case of Greece, we had a very different situation from the one we have elsewhere. We were asked, we are highly welcome, and this is generating a lot of value for the bank there, for the economy there, as we connect it to our 13 countries and for our clients there. Therefore, that was more of a reverse inquiry that worked very well for both, and I have a lot of respect for them. I think our team and their team worked very well together, and we're happy with what we have. In the other markets, you know the story we talked about. I think on the rest, clearly, we have stated very clearly where we have an interest and where we don't. But we are going to take a lot more attention on government position and political position, because now it has become a binary gate as to whether you can do things or not.
Let's zoom out a little bit and talk as well a bit macro. It's not the last question. I've got a correction in my ear. So, other banking CEOs do see a lot of money flowing into Europe from the States, potentially also from Asia. Do you see that as well? And do you think that's the moment for Europe we are currently witnessing?
Well, I am a lot more neutral. Okay. I think that, number one, that flow will depend very much on what the US do. So if all this volatility at the moment and all the action that the current administration is pursuing in some way has a positive impact, as they usually always do in the US in some way, because they're very focused on what has an impact on the economy and on business. If it has a positive impact, I think we'll see a pullback. That's one element. If it has a negative impact, that fosters more investment here. But on the other hand, Europe for the moment is benefiting from an expectation that because of a fracture of relationship with the US or the distancing, and because of what we need as an economic bloc, there will be convergence. There will be banking union, there will be capital market union, there will be a lot of spend on infrastructure, on defense, on a lot of things. That's exciting for the market. Therefore, money flowing in. But if little by little investors realize that this is a little bit of lip service, but it doesn't really happen, money will flow back in a nanosecond. And you will see it very quickly. So already there is a lot of nervousness on, hang on, we all wanted banking unions, but every time there is a transaction, local government have a view that prevents it from happening. So really you don't want banking union. Hang on, capital market union, where is the progress on that? Hang on, defense. Yes, okay, it seems it's going in the right direction, but every country in Europe is going its own way. There is no convergence. So we need to be careful, because I do think I've always thought Europe has a phenomenal opportunity. If you take population, education, innovation, everything, we have every reason to be an economic bloc on par with the US, but it's our fault if we don't do it.
It's much about execution, isn't it?
It is. It is about execution, and I think we confuse sovereignty and pride of being Italian, German, French, etc., which we all are, with we can be that and put to common denominator things that allow us to be better. I don't think I would lose my pride if we have a common defense for Europe. I don't think I would lose my pride if we have pan-European banks. I think I would lose my pride if I cannot be who I am and I am forced to behave in a way that is not me. But I think we're confusing the two, and I think for us to continue to have a right to be who we want to be, we need to be stronger economically, because otherwise we cannot defend our objectives and what we want to be.
But in other words, it needs more political will. It's a bit like the Euro project. We would never have the Euro if there were not some, real, like...
And I do think that there is now, and I'm a Europeist, so, but we have now increasing questions. Well, if this and this and this and this does not happen, does it make sense to keep the Euro? We didn't have those questions a year ago. So I think we are at a crossroad. I think every country and every citizen have the right to be who they want to be, but is there 20% that we put to common denominator to unite Europe and to have the right to our ideals or not? But if not, I think a lot of people are starting to think, then let's unwind, and that's very dangerous.